Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Welcome, everybody, to episode 100 of Behind the Camera. We are finally here. We have hit triple digits, and we have a very special episode in store for you today. But before we get into today's show, if you would like to follow Behind the Camera across social media, you can find my link tree in the description. That will take you to Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and it also has the link to where you can buy my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. This is available in both paperback and ebook and is free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited. And if you want to see more of the behind-the-scenes side of the podcast, you can also support the show on Patreon. For £3 a month, you'll get access to extra content, including a Patreon-exclusive series, your name added to the wall of patrons at the end of every episode of Behind the Camera, and much more. But now, getting into today's conversation. So, I do still have a guest for this episode, a friend who is no stranger to the podcast, very, very talented streamer and musician whose music you should definitely check out on all platforms. As a matter of fact, he actually composed all of the music for Behind the Camera. But I don't want to say too much, so I am just going to give him the floor. My guest today is Logaaaaan64.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 100th episode of Behind the Camera, normally hosted by Andy, but today he's being interviewed on Behind the Camera. My name is Logan, also known as Logaaaaan64 online. Very casual, drop the most popular Australian Mario 64 speedrunner. No big deal though. But today's episode is different. For 99 episodes, this man has sat on the side of the table, asking the questions, pulling stories out of people, and somehow making everybody else the focus. But today, that changes. Because not only has he built Behind the Camera into something that genuinely matters, he also put his own story, his own philosophy, and everything he's learned into a book. A book that doesn't just talk about what happens behind the lens, but what it costs to be there. So for episode 100, we're flipping the script. Wicka wicka. You know his voice, you know his questions, but today you're going to hear his answers. Let's go behind him. But dude, welcome to Behind the Camera. What's it like being a guest on your very own podcast, man?
Thank you. And thank you for that lovely intro. I really do appreciate that. What's it like being a guest on my own podcast? It's so I've done it before. Like at the very end of 2024, my wife actually interviewed me on the show, and it was a lot of fun. So, but it was very telling about the fact that I really was aware of what kind of guest I was, because being a host and being a guest are two different things. And when you're a guest on your own podcast, I think the gaps are really, really evident. But you know what, man? It's exciting, and I think it all comes down to the host as well. And obviously I couldn't have picked a better guest host for today's episode. So thank you again.
That's quite interesting. So this is your second time. You mentioned your wife did also interview in the past, which is very good. But since then, a lot has happened. Obviously, you started off in terms of Behind the Camera and everything. How have things changed from when you first started to where you are now at episode 100? Like, how much of the original vision has completely gone? Has it any evolved? Has anything changed? Because I know it's been 99 episodes so far, but is it where you thought it was going to be?
Well, to be honest, whenever I started this and did those initial first 20 episodes back in 2024, I realized actually quite recently that I never really had like a long-term vision. So I started this and it was always just going to be interview streamers. Then a couple of episodes happened and I did them offline, and I had to add like a little bit of production to them. And then, of course, like the Grand Kirkhope episode was like the turning point of like the
classic.
first professional sort of interview that I'd done. That was like the turning point. Excuse me. And I feel like at that point I was kind of like, okay, I kind of need to do like something a little bit more with this. And then it was that was the kind of point I was like, okay, Levy, I want to kind of go for a more professional side of this and to be quite honest, that's what kind of gave me the vision of what I wanted the podcast to become, because I signed up to a subscription service called Podmatch, and that kind
Ooh.
of links you with people looking to be guests on podcasts and other hosts and stuff like that. And I was really kind of it was an eye-opening experience, to say the least, because I had never seen the true kind of world of podcasting for what it was. Like, I mean, there's millions out there, millions, and like I was just like like a drop in the water, and I was like, holy crap! Like I thought I was doing pretty good for what I was, but in comparison, it's like a lot of these people had their stuff together, and I was like, whoa, okay. So I kind of knew like at that point I needed to develop a lot more, and from then on, man, like from really kind of the February, March 2025, it's really just been kind of all go in terms of like how can I continue this and really having that kind of vision of what I want to do with it going forward.
So would you say it's more like, because you mentioned obviously, there was the Grand Coco episode, which I know is a big one, which is also mentioned in your book. But is it more the first few times you interviewed someone outside of what you thought was going to be just, I'm going to interview all streamers for the podcast, where you thought I can do this in a larger capacity, or?
I think so, yeah. Like because there was 3 episodes that I did that were all offline in that kind of first sort of 25 plus or something like that, and that they weren't really gaming related. One was a TikTok agency. The other was a mental health charity that was kind of related to gaming because of a campaign they were doing, but like it was more based around the charity themselves as well as the campaign. And then of course Grant Kirko, yes, gaming, but more to do with his work. So it was more of a professional sort of thing. So yeah, I think it was having that kind of little bit extra experience in terms of interviewing people, like different people who weren't just streamers.
Yeah.
Was I kind of like, okay, I feel like as an interviewer, I'm kind of being able to develop, because the important thing to note on that is the fact that whenever I interviewed streamers, I was really kind of asking them very, very similar questions. So like it was very much kind of, what's your background? What do you do outside of streaming? And like, a kind of question that would have looked into the future. So the questions were like, as good as the conversations were, and they're quite varied, the line of question was still kind of very much the same. And I don't think I really
So
kind of
yeah.
kept it into my timing. I don't think I really kept the timing as well as I could have, because it was almost a little bit overstructured. But it's all just learning ultimately. Like it's all just learning. Like I'm still learning today, 100 episodes in.
That's very true. And as long as you're continually learning, I feel that's a good position to be
Oh,
in.
for
The whole like,
sure.
I'll never believe I'm the expert at it, because when you do, you stop, trying new things or doing something exciting. But there was a little mention there earlier that obviously that I knew that because of your book, from podcast host to worldwide published author. One, congratulations, but two,
Thank
what
you.
made you want to write a book as opposed to making it a podcast or an episode, trying to tell that story?
Well, first of all, thank you. Yes, and I do have the book Behind the Camera: The Journey So Far. It's available now on Amazon. But yeah, so honestly, there is really kind of no sort of story behind why I wrote the book. It was very much just I've interviewed people, like a lot of authors or people who do things but have written books. So and I just kind of thought, it's like a midnight thought lying in bed, and I was just like, I've interviewed so many people at this point. I feel like I could like tell my own story in a book, and
Oh, nice. It'll
you
be like
know,
inspiration from your guests around like what's possible.
it was very much just sort of like I say, like a lot of people who I'd interviewed, like they were not really strictly authors, but like had written books, and I was just kind of thinking, I might give this a go, and but it was one of those ideas that when you have like an idea, you get like your you get your day's worth of motivation when you're lying in bed and you can't physically do anything about it. That's a sort of
Yeah,
way, yeah,
yeah.
right. And literally, that was one of those ideas. But I woke up the next day and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna literally get started on this. And then I started it in August last year, and I think I had it finished in January. And it was just
Wow.
because it was the way it was I wanted it to detail the story of like my podcast journey from beginning to where it was currently, but I wanted it to also kind of highlight the lessons that I learned from that. So, like, one of
Yeah.
the biggest chapters in the book is the decision that I made to stop streaming and go into podcasting, in terms of online full time. And man, that chapter sucked to write. was it was so cathartic at the same time getting it out, but man, it just like I had so many fucking good memories streaming on, and it was like I yeah, it was and it's kind of been brought up a few times. You can go back to it and all, but like it's one of those things. I think I'm past it, but like it's yeah, like I
I
just
think
kind of wanted to get my story out, considering the fact that like I spend a lot of my time doing that with other people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think the whole like obviously saying it was hard to write that chapter because like like you said, you reminisced and you thought of like the good moments you had when you were streaming. But I think maybe again from what I know based on how long I've been following you and whatnot, more like it served its purpose. If you know what I mean, like it
Yeah.
got you to put yourself out there, start experimenting with different formats, and obviously leading into podcasting. And it's like it definitely, you got everything you needed out of it. You got the ability to present live as well. Because I think a lot of people, when they start podcasting, if they do it all offline, the first time they do a live podcast, big different vibe for them. You know what I mean? It's a different area. But if you started doing live entertainment from the get go, so I think that's like a good approach to have as well. But that's pretty cool, man. Did you have like a few different ideas? Like, did you have to rewrite it a bunch before it felt right? Like any parts of the book or just the premise of what you learned from the conversations?
Nothing major. I think that the main things really were just kind of not repeating myself because there's a lot of overlap from like the second half of the book anyway. There was like a lot of overlap because it talks about things like burnout, defining success, being a better podcaster, things like that, and then sort of looking ahead. Now, those things were kind of hard enough to write because you don't want it to be like a pocket-sized book, right? I mean,
A novella, I think, is the
yeah,
title.
like you want it to be like a we novella size type thing, even though it's a memoir. But it, yeah, like I wouldn't say there was anything I had to like majorly rewrite, but it was more I had to really trying to keep everything relevant to the chapter and not really kind of go back because as you're like retelling like a story, there's so much more that you remember that kind of comes out just from your thoughts. Like you kind of almost forget, or it's in the back of your mind until you're actively thinking about something, and then obviously like a bit of a snowball effect. So, like there were times where I could have finished a chapter in a day just because I was just literally on fire, and then it was like okay. But yeah, it was the writing process itself was fairly straightforward, and it was nice because like as I was finishing it, because I was writing it like finishing it live essentially in terms of like this is what's just happened. I was adding this into the book. I was able to kind of like anything I learned at that time add in literally as and when it happened.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Because from what I understand, from when you first started writing it, that's all like you were like, oh, I started like every time I spoke to you, it was about I've done this much progress. Like I've kept writing, which I was amazed. I was like, oh my god, this guy's like all about authoring a book at this moment. And yeah, 5 months is a crazy turnaround. But I enjoyed it. My missus read it too, and she said it was easy to read. It was a good book, and she enjoyed it too, which is nice.
Appreciate that.
Was there anything in the book or even since you've started from now to from the beginning, is there any point where you just thought I can't write this, like obviously in the book, or I can't say this when I'm talking to a guest or anything like that?
Ooh. Um. So
The
I'm
answer could
not.
be but I'm
No, I
just
mean,
curious.
so I'm not going to go as far to say that the book is like censored in any way. Um, I there were maybe certain things that might have happened in particular. Like, I might have had particularly bad episodes and just not mention them, because even if like the episode was like relevant to a topic in the book and I thought the episode was not very good, I just didn't want to kind of give it that mention. So I I can count on one hand the amount of bad episodes I've ever had. I'm not going to say obviously, who they were, but I've had a couple of bad interviews, and for me it was just kind of like, if I if I put them in the book, the only bad thing I'm really going to have to say is the only thing I'm really going to have to say is something bad, and I don't really want to do that. I don't want to kind of give it the time of day for that. Yeah, that was like sort of pretty much the height of it, really. Like, there wasn't really anything other than that, because a lot of the things.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, like,
I guess basically
hopefully that
you
answers your
learn-
question. By the way, I don't know if I've just kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent.
No, absolutely does. It does. That's what I was saying in terms of, like, obviously, so you were saying some part in your book. You didn't want to reference an episode, but if the lesson is there, whatever you're referencing or having learned or expressing from that, it still came through in the end.
100%.
But yeah, I was wondering if there was, because you do see the listing of every episode at the end of the book too. From that point, which is going to be cool to look at, in a year or two from now, to see how far it's gone from those humble beginnings. But yeah, sorry for cutting you off there.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. But it's interesting you mention the the episode count as well at the end, because by the time I give myself a hard deadline for finishing writing the book, and because I wanted to release it at a certain point, and I wanted to promote it as much as I could. So the book itself only goes up to episode 80 in terms of the acknowledgements. But by the time we released it, I think we were closer to 90 at that point. But I kind of had to put like a little bit of a caveat in, and then all the other little sort of nuances with like the behind the camera quick cuts and stuff. So yeah, I'd had about 100 conversations at the time.
That's true. And then there's also, like, obviously the idea of, like, podcasting in its own nature. Like, you can write it and say these are the episodes I published, but who's to say you don't already have 50 that you've already actually recorded it, ready to go?
Oh,
But
yeah,
obviously
exactly.
you're XYZ at whatever time too. But yeah, that is quite interesting. The more you know. Now back to the journey so far. I've got a bunch of little things between my questions, and I've just written interesting 20 times between everyone. I wanted to know, because I did read, obviously, you talk about success and failure and what it means to you, but I'm wondering if there was a point for yourself, from the point you started, at any point where you looked at it and you thought, this is going to be successful. Like, you can see it's worth putting continuous effort into, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was this a certain episode or a certain influx or even a mindset where you've just gone, damn, I'm going to keep doing this because this is really good?
Do you know what? Pretty much from the very, very beginning. Like,
Wow.
so, and this is one of those things that actually kind of came with a bit of a lesson for me. So, and so for me, it's when you're looking at interviewing streamers, one of the sort of things that you kind of automatically look at by default is like their follower kind, right? So,
Yep.
like, take the likes of yourself, a lot of followers on all platforms, that's the kind of that kind of audience thing, sort of the audience that I have kind of also kind of grows into your audience, and sort of, not always vice versa, but there is that kind of sort of a crossover in audience. People in your audience will then know about the podcast. And then the first ever partnered streamer I ever had on the show was Teagues. And then shortly after I had Bubsy. Now, you know what, they're kind of like, they both do this full time. They, you've seen like the kind of amount of viewers they have at any given time, right? It was kind of at that point, because I was like, for me, it was like I was still streaming at this point, and it was very much like, should I just stay in my lane here? Should I really be reaching out to these people who do this full time, who have it, that this is essentially their job? Are they really going to take time out of it? And literally, like, I just thought, fuck it, I'm going to ask them, because you don't ask, you don't get. And
Exactly.
yeah, and literally they were both incredibly receptive, and they were like, yeah, I would love to, thank you for thinking of me. And I'm like, I was kind of sitting like, how is this not like a normal request you get like on a daily basis? You know what I mean? And I know
Yeah.
since they've both been like a lot since, but it was really kind of at that point because, and you look at the metrics in like a sort of like a sort of vanity kind of way, and it was very much like I was like, yeah, I mean, I was like, I have no right to ask any people kind of like this thing, and then whenever they said yes, and this is where the kind of lesson came in. So I mentioned about the audience crossover in some way. I had like a lot of people or a few people say to me, "Oh my god, these episodes are going to be huge for the show."
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think I may have been one at that time too.
maybe, but the thing is, I knew no different at this point. This was when the show was in single digits. And did these episodes do very well? Not really. At the time, maybe, but if I look at them now, if I was to look at them now in the rankings, I would say they're probably in the sort of, middle level at this point, which is, again, totally fine. But it's one of those things where you really learn the hard way that there is no guarantee of whoever you have on the show. There is no guarantee that their audience is going to tune in as well. So it's like I learned that you have to sort of really have your own audience who has your back, who is always listening. And of course there will be a bit that spills into the other people's audience and viewership, but it's not guaranteed. So, but like, yeah, I kind of learned from early on, it was very much like, the idea of just asking people to come on the show, no matter who they were, that's just something I never really struggled with, probably because of those like particular instances.
That's true, because I do believe, especially early on, being in the streamer world and stuff like that, and just like when you first start, if you ever start streaming yourself, things like that, the first time you see someone who's like a partnered streamer or that someone who does it full time for a job, you instantly think that's the level of success. That's it. They've made it. So the fact that you very early on were like, I'm going to reach out to these people who, like you said, you weren't sure if they were going to do it or not, and they did. But like seeing that, like that was the first time you started reaching out to people who are not in, above your pay grade, if you were to, rank it in that sort of way. And since then you've had, you've had authors, you've had a whole world of different people. And like, again, like you said, it's never been a problem for you to ask. But yeah, it's interesting to see that like that's a sort of lesson in terms of setting up an audience. Cause I do think some people definitely do think that way about podcasting, that it's as easy as getting amazing guests. And it's like, yeah, but if they, you can't rely on them to tell their audience about it. Because if I follow someone because I like what they do on stream, doesn't mean I want to listen to a podcast about them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But yeah, that's interesting. The more you know. So in terms of like, so from day one, you thought this is going to be successful, and you ran, and obviously you still are at this point. Amazing. 100 episodes. Oh my God.
I know.
Can't believe it.
I can't believe we're here right now. Like, and it's not even been 2 years. Now I have kind of upped the production a little bit. So realistically,
Absolutely,
if it
yeah.
was once a week, it'd probably be about 80 or something, 85, 90, maybe something like that. I'm not really too sure. Probably 90. But we kind of decided to, bring things forward a little bit. But yeah, like, I mean, the notion of success, though, it's like, for me, I kind of find success is so subjective to the point, like, I mean, especially in podcasting. So I'll give you a few figures in terms of podcasting. So most podcasts don't make it past, well, I hear different numbers for this, but we'll say episode 10. Most podcasts do not make it past episode 10. I think it's something like only 5% of podcasts do. Same amount the same amount that make it over 4 episodes. There is, so like you get to 4 episodes, huge drop off. You get to 10 episodes, huge drop off. And based on that, if you had to guess, what percentage of podcasts make it to 100?
Oh, okay. Insert Jeopardy music here. I feel like I kind of may have a close guess to this because I hear about if you have this many viewers, you're in the X amount of percent of streamers.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it kind of would translate to podcasts. So I'd say the amount of podcasts percentage wise that make it to 100 would be like less than 1%.
Oh, yeah. It's surprisingly kind of far. It's 6%.
Damn it. But also
6%.
amazing.
But, I mean,
That's still insane. I'm that person who's like, oh, how much do you think I got paid this week? And someone's like 20 grand. And, it's just disappointing whatever you tell them. So I feel bad for saying it less than 1%.
But it's interesting that, you compare it to like the streamer figures because it kind of just shows the magnitude of what it is you need to do to be considered a success from the casual viewer, right? So someone's gonna look at me, my show and think, 100 episodes, okay, cool, that's gone on for a long time, but I've never heard of them before. So but then they're gonna look at like one of the top Twitch streamers, which is in the 0.00001%, for example, and they're gonna have heard of them, and I think people's sort of perception of success is very much kind of almost material based and metrics based, whereas for me it's like 100 episodes. I mean, and if you look at the sort of number of listens in terms of what I've had, I don't know if it's a good number or not, but I'm happy with it. It's a personal success to me. When I hit that first 1,000 within a year, that was huge for me. That was a fucking massive moment for me because it was like, wow, people have listened to my show over 1,000 times. That's amazing. And I think we were on like 50 episodes or something. That was great. And now we're close to 3.5. I'm not even 2 years in. So it's well over doubled. It was well over doubled in size over the last sort of 10 months. And it's sort of, or nearly 11 months actually. And that to me is my success. That genuinely is what I consider to be a success because I don't make money off the podcast. I don't make money for doing interviews. I just, it's a far cry away from being my full-time job. There's a lot of work and other things that need to go into that. But for what started out as like a little online project, yeah, man, I would say it's been a success for sure.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. And there may or may not have been some mention of this, but I think to being all in terms of creating and starting something, because I know certain people in the creative sort of mindset who would go through and say, I'm going to start, a podcast. Yeah. And then if after X amount of time, if they haven't made money from it, if they haven't set a certain arbitrary goal, they go, well, it's a failure, and they quit. And I think the fact that like your passion for getting people to tell their stories about what they do to make them, not to make them successful, but what they have done to that point to get them to where they are, is really cool. And it's been cool to see your way of interviewing people like evolve over time too. Apart from obviously just going from streamers to different people like executive producers, I think the level of questioning has like leveled up too, in that sense. But I was going to lead that into my next question as well. And I will say that last answer was very interesting. But do you think now at this point, what makes a good interview? And is there any sort of thing you use to follow to make sure that it goes along those guidelines? Like, do you think you can, is it like an icebreaker you use to sort of guarantee a good vibe with someone, or? A bunch of questions at once. But.
For me, no, you're fine. So for me, I don't particularly use an icebreaker, but I know that that's something that people do. I don't personally do it, but I know that that's something that other people do. But for me, like, and also I appreciate you bringing that up because that is something that I've been very, very aware of in terms of how things have developed. So for context, for those who may be listening for the first time, whenever I interview streamers, I would have sent over the streamers the questions in advance, and it would have been about 5 or 6 questions, and they would have been very, very similarly formatted in terms of what's your background, what's your what do you like to do outside, what sort of inspired you to play particular games or the random things, but it all kind of related into the world of stream. There wasn't really too much. It was like I went as personal as they wanted it to, so I kept it as open ended as that. But it almost felt like a little bit too rehearsed at times. Now the change for me, it came when one of the first times I guested on a podcast, and this was over a year ago now. It's like February last year, when I started to kind of like branch out more into podcasting. I ended up on a podcast called Stag, and it was really just a kind of conversational sort of thing, like let's talk about life, so give like a bit of background about myself, and we just talked about different things, and it just the conversation just went the way it did. And I it was quite a long episode, but like the way the conversation went, it was just that. And I noticed that this guy's way of interviewing was very much like he didn't really get too much information from me. So he utilized what, for those who aren't aware, something that's called active listening. You're listening to a conversation, or you're listening to somebody, and they are able to pick up on things that you're saying and ask you questions based on that. So you have a linear sort of line of question, but people are sort of like, let's pick out this bit of it, let's bring a conversation over this way, and kind of just, it's sort of in essence how normal conversation works. Like exactly. And like I kind of noticed this as an interviewer myself. I was just like, well, I'm not doing this. I maybe should sort of give this a go. And for me, that kind of made me start to research into my guests a little bit more. Sort of kind of like goading them into talking about particular things outside of what it is that they did. So what makes it easier for me now is using Podmatch. Everybody has like their own individual like profile, and like they can put as much or as little in as they want, and they all have like websites and things. So the research is very easy to do. So I kind of like, what I do now is I'll pick out maybe 5 or 6 different talking points, most of which will lead into each other anyway. But to go back to your original question is like, what makes a good interview? What makes a good conversation? It's very much a two-way thing. There is only so much an interviewer can do to bring out conversation. Like you can ask somebody a question. They can either give you as much of an answer or as little of an answer as possible. You kind of have to, if you have to drag the conversation out, if you have to really kind of, if you have to get them to sort of further explain one little thing, then I don't think that that's really going to go the right way, until maybe you bring up one particular topic that they just are really kind of, gung-ho about. But like as an interviewer, there's only so much research you can do. And sometimes the research is the fun part. Now, I'm not talking about like going to their Facebook and looking at their holiday photos from 2012. Like I'm talking about relative work to what they do. But you kind of have to, have that skill to be able to draw out the conversation, but also in like an inviting kind of way rather than a probing kind of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, less of an interrogation, more of a natural dictate. Like obviously just an interview. Like
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like,
why did you start doing this? But that's interesting. It's good to know. And I suppose so. Like the idea behind using what they said when you were a guest on that podcast, the idea of the active listening and using that key questions to sort of lean you into whatever they're going to talk about next, is how you would define a good a good interview to some degree, and shaped what you do now. But is there one sort of like catch-all phrase or something you use or may use, even if it's offline before the podcast starts, to like sort of get the vibe right for your guests? Is there anything that you've tried or no?
There isn't, but I would love to have one. I would love to have one. No, I do finish the podcast in the same way, but this is just all offline. Like the last line of every episode is until next time, stay creative. I'm gonna forget it here live.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like the TikTok series I used to make on my Andy Games account. Like it was like, yeah, useful, probably not. Interesting. Well, I sure hope so. I wish I had something like that, but I don't, unfortunately. Like I was on a podcast recently. So someone I just met through the podcasting space. Him and I have actually interviewed a couple of the same people before, like including the singer from Wheatus and Frank Turner, and he interviews like a lot more musicians. And his podcast is called The Full Circle. Phenomenal podcast.
Much check it out.
Oh, like just for like a very, very, very brief kind of description. The way he does it is like you pick 5 songs, and every song has to lead into the next, and then the last song has to lead into the first one, thus creating the full circle. But what I'm getting at with this is the fact that he does his like full podcast intros like live with the guest, and it's so energetic, and it's like a proper announcer, and he finishes it off with boom, boom, boom. And I was just, it's so just like, you're like so taken aback by it, and you're like, that was pretty fucking cool, man. Like, like, so I would love to have something like that. But yeah, shout out to DC for the Full Circle podcast. Like, he's an absolute legend. Really have a lot of time for that man.
That's awesome. That's cool. And you mentioned too earlier using Podbatch and stuff, and I know there is a joke too, but I think you have actually described it as kind of like Tinder for podcasts, right? Like the idea that you're looking for someone who matches with your sort of vibe for it. And if you both agree, then, you've got a guest, you've got, someone on your podcast and vice versa. That's pretty cool. I never would have known because being outside of podcasting, things like that even existed. So it's crazy to say too, that when you mentioned that your first look into there sort of was eye-opening in the sense of, I suppose, like, little fish in a big pond thing. Like, oh my God, there's like really big setup people here. There's people with like thousands of guests, or I don't know the level of what you can see.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what you're saying. Yeah, it was like, I went in there at 31 episodes, and which 31 episodes is still like quite a relatively decent number, but there was no like production in mind. And all these people were, some of them did it full time, others, because I don't know what it takes to get into it full time, but some people did it.
Yeah, and power to them, respect. I mean, like, I suppose it depends on the level of commitment, what they do, if they have expenses as well, every time they do an episode. Because I know from the start yourself, considering you already had started doing streaming and content creation first before podcasting, you were at the point where you had the majority of your stuff ready to go. So doing remote episodes and stuff wasn't a big financial gamble for you at all. You know what I mean? You're just like, oh, I already have this stuff. I may as well use it in some other capacity. Which I think is good, because I know some people, when they, especially with podcasting, some people are trying to think too much about what they need, and I need the right mics, I need the right this, I need the right that, and it's like, I don't disagree. I'm sure the amazing equipment is beautiful, but I think what you put out matters more than exactly how it sounds. Sound is important, very important, especially for a podcast. But it's good to know that you use, things that aren't, amazing, top of the line yet, but it comes out sounding great every time. Like, touch wood, I've never listened to an episode in my car and gone, oh, let me turn this down like a whole bunch or up a whole bunch. It comes out really well. But I do, and I apologize, guys, in advance. I'm not a podcast host, so if this seems a bit scrambled, that's why. This is not my job. But I did kind of want to ask a question, which I think maybe you've never been asked before, or maybe you haven't asked someone else. Because I have been, long-time listener, first-time interviewer. But where is it? I've got a big list. I wrote like a lot of questions for you. I'm not going to ask all of them because some are a bit silly. What's something that your audience thinks they know about you as a person, but they're wrong about? Because I know there is some people do know about yourself and what you do
Oh,
in your free time, but do you think there's a perception around you that people just have that is just straight up wrong? Yeah, that's the
wow.
question.
Honestly, I don't know. Because I don't know what my audience think of me, to be quite honest with you.
That's true. I mean, like from a perspective of from what I know, because people
Yeah.
obviously talk to me about you and whatnot. Um, they think you're obviously an outgoing person. You're easy to talk to because obviously you run a podcast and you do talking very frequently. Very knowledgeable, things like that. So if I would answer it for you, I would say that you're absolutely dumb as bricks, and that's the misconception. No, I can't. I couldn't think of any sort of like one, but I'm like, I wonder if there's someone who's like reached out to you and said, "Oh my God, Andy, I thought you'd be really into this. Maybe maybe it's episodes of Invincible or something." And you're just like, "Oh, I'm actually not into this at all," based off the podcast. But yeah, I was just curious.
That's a
Is there
very
much interaction with your audience directly, apart from like direct friends you have? I guess.
not majorly. No. So it's the reason it's such an interesting question is because when you're a streamer, the vast majority of your audience. You know the vast majority of who's watching you, especially like the returning people. Um, and then when you go to podcasting, unless people reach out to you or unless people shout you out on social media, you don't know. You really don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's something that I kind of really noticed quite recently. But in terms of like perceptions, I mean, if anybody has ever thought I was outgoing, then that's a complete, a complete misrepresentation of the truth. I'm very much an introvert. Very, very much an introvert. I like my own space. I like my own space and my own time with my wife. That's kind of like something that I really kind of cherish. I
It's fair.
See, it's quite an interesting one because like I don't really talk about my personal life in a live setting that much, but I don't really have much to really kind of hide or talk about. Do you know what I mean? Like I personally, I just live a very quiet life. Like I really, my my life outside of this is I work. I do all the other humanly things that we do. I I but I don't know, man. You've got me thinking though. You've certainly got me thinking. I mean,
Which is good. I mean, like I'm on purpose
yeah, I
not saying
like
the
that.
my questions so you can sort of like ruminate on it a little bit and sort of squirm. Um, but it is interesting to see because I know there isn't too much interaction, but I know some people have messaged you or may have about certain episodes, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not sure if in terms of all the different platforms, if there's like a review section or people do it per episode, whatever it may be. Because like you said, there is a lot of people listening to it, especially different individual viewers, in the
Hmm.
thousands at this point, which is incredible. That's so cool.
Thank you, man.
But yeah, it is sort of an interesting look into yourself and you behind the camera, so to speak, because like you said, you live a very quiet life with your missus, which is very lovely, But I suppose if because like you said, you don't talk about yourself, your own life too much. Having that separation too is very good because I mean you're coming to you're coming into an episode, I imagine, with the mindset of trying to get everything out of the guest, and you'd only like relate things if it was directly related to your life and you had an anecdote. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to have that separation as well, especially if it's something you do all the time. Because it's amazing that, like you said, it's a quiet life, you work, you spend time with your wife and stuff. But like, if it is directly involved, I feel like, and things go horrible in one aspect of life, it would imagine be very hard to all of a sudden not talk about one aspect and not have to explain why.
Yeah.
Like if you always talked about work and then at one point you don't talk about it for an episode, and everyone's like, oh, I wonder why. And it's like, oh, he actually, is on probation for gooning at work, whatever it may be, like.
Yeah, of course, of course. But like, it's interesting because like it's the sort of like layer of protection that you give yourself when you have like an online presence, and that applies to streaming as well. Because, for example, with yourself, you go live half the week, every 2 days, and obviously until your schedule changes again. But with that, it's very much a sort of, you only really let everybody know as much as you want to know about you as a person,
Yeah,
outside
for
of,
sure.
streaming Mario 64. Whereas, as an interview host, for me, I kind of have that layer of protection because as much as people are there because it's my podcast, other people are there because of the particular guests.
Yeah,
Then it
yeah.
kind of spreads from there. So it's less so much that it's, and again, it kind of, there is a sort of overlap with streaming as well, because like for podcasting, it's like, a lot of people there who don't tune in regularly are there for the guest. Whereas with some streamers, a lot of people who don't tune in regularly are there for what's being streamed. So it's kind of, it's yeah, it is very like interesting that way for sure. Sorry, I stole your line about it
Interesting.
being interesting.
Okay, it's totally fine. I was still going to throw it in anyway. It doesn't matter. I was going to ask too. Obviously, again, it's kind of hard, but it's linked in a little bit based off the limited feedback that you would get. Based off the podcast and what you do, even if it's from a guest or a previous guest. Has there ever been a listener or a guest who's changed your perspective on either delivering episodes or just the podcast in general? Like, has anyone ever come back to you with something and you've gone, oh, I may never do that again, or I'm gonna, does that make sense?
I do,
No.
yeah. Not really. Nobody's like kind of ever come back to me and basically been like, "That was shit. You should improve." No, I'm joking. No, I think there are certain things that I've learned from going back and listening to the episodes, especially while I've been editing. And so, like, I mean, I've had people come out to me and like, sort of say a lot of positive things and things like that they really enjoyed the conversation, things like that. And viewers and listeners who've come out and said, like, I really like this particular bit resonated with me, but in terms of like changing things, thankfully not so much. But it's like, I hope I'm answering your question here, but like, yeah,
Not
it's,
really.
oh no, oh fuck.
Sorry, you hit me with a not really earlier when he was like, "Does that make sense?" And I was like, oh, I had to do it straight back. But you are sorry to mess with you.
Thank you, thank God. But yeah, like, I mean, I've had people reach out and say, "Oh my God," like, but then there's another kind of weird thing about funny little nuance about podcasting is that like you will have people reach out to you and be like, "Oh, I really enjoyed how you delivered this particular thing in this episode. I would like to introduce you to my client," and that is something you get, which I originally loved, and now I'm just like kind of, oh my God, fuck off, like, some of these people are the biggest time wasters imaginable. But when people reach out to you like that,
Is it for them to be a guest or for them to help you with that segment?
oh no, it's
Like
them
with that.
for people. It's for people to looking for guests for like their, like they might have connections or something, or clients or things like that. But the thing is like, because this show is really not segmented at all. It's a lot of the time you don't really know what to expect per episode. And that's especially with the fact that the guests are also different as well. It's sort of, like, I mean, I've had, I think I had one episode which, I would probably say is like slightly controversial. And I think I've had a couple of people reach out to me and tell me about the episode being, they disagreed with a lot of the episode. And it was,
Can you tell us? It is episode 100 after all. What episode this
I'm
is?
not going to say the exact episode, but it was an episode that I did a few months ago. And
Mm.
it was with a psychiatrist who did not believe in medication. and yeah, like it was. I was.
Like,
I don't get me wrong. I
yeah.
quite. What's that?
Interesting perspective. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and it was as an interview, you have to stay incredibly neutral
yeah,
because
without a
there's
doubt.
a lot of credibility at stake, you know. And there were certain things that I did agree with, and other things that I didn't agree with. But again, it wasn't about me; it was about this man and his perspective. But I've had a couple of people reach out to me and just say that episode I don't want to really say I didn't like it, but it's the closest one. The closest one to people disliking. So yeah, it's I think that's probably the closest thing I can think of. But again, it's very much less so much about a changing certain things about it, but more so about particular instances.
Yeah, I think too, it is kind of a good experience. Obviously, if you would interview somebody and they have a take that is quite polarizing, the fact that anybody at all is reaching out to you to say, I disagree with this, means people are listening as well.
Oh, for
Like, I know
sure.
it's a given
Yeah.
because you look at your analytics and you'll see people have listened, but the fact that it's moved someone enough to say, hey, I think here's my opinion about this, is quite a powerful thing. Especially in
Definitely.
terms of a medium where you don't get feedback, getting it for something like that, I think is pretty impressive, man. So that's
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
kind of put the good with the bad there.
Oh, for sure. No, 100%. Because I would rather somebody reach out to me. Now, this sounds, it's going to sound bad, but I'd rather somebody reach out to me and say, like, look, I didn't particularly like, you know, this particular episode. But I would almost rather somebody come and say to me, look, giving me that kind of constructive feedback in terms of like what I could have done about it. Because, yeah, if you find yourself agreeing with the wrong thing or being a little bit too kind of tight-lipped on certain things, it can be almost quite telling to some people. Like, kind of think it can help make it mean you lose the trust of some people, and you don't want to do that when you're in this position. But like, as an interviewer, there just has to be that kind of that non-bias there. You just have to be so down the middle and just like respect their opinion for what it is, even if you heavily disagree. You just have to be like, well, that's okay. I mean, fair enough. I'm interested in your perspective because that's what it pretty much is. It's all about, really.
Yeah, without a doubt, and you're giving people the opportunity to share that, which is is a very cool thing. I do kind of want to sort of lead things towards the end of this. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have any really amazing particular questions that need a lot of delving into. I've sort of picked at you a fair bit,
No, of course.
but I do kind of want to sort of sum it up with a little bit of a quick fire and then just hit with a couple more if that's
Ooh,
okay.
of course, of
Very
course.
similar to a podcast I've watched where they've done quick fire questions. Um, but I'd like to know, considering that and for those of you, I'm making a lot of references to everything he's been doing up to this point. But I'd like to know, even, episode 200 to there or beyond, is there a single guest that you want to have on the show, or you need to have on by that point? Or even in the future, you're one that's like, I want to try as hard as I can to have this person on. Is there one guest that you have in your mind?
There is. Matt Hafey, singer of Trivium. He is the
Yeah,
white
let's go,
whale
dude.
for now. In terms of getting him before 200, it's I've never actually looked at it that way in terms of getting particular people on before a certain time, but it's always good to kind of have that kind of aim. But yeah, he is the white whale for behind the camera. Like, I would love to, the lead singer of one of my favorite bands, and he's a proper old school gamer as well. Like, man, it just would be,
Killer guitarist as well.
yeah, dude, it would just be the that would just be the ultimate one for me for sure.
Nice. Well, that's cool. It's good to know. We'll keep it moving. Like I said, these are quick fire
Of
questions.
course.
What is the hardest interview you've ever done in the first 100? Obviously, you can include that sort of person from before. I will take that as a giveaway if you need to.
Okay. Hardest interview I have ever done probably would have been the first streamer that I interviewed that was a little bit where I kind of felt like I had to drag out the the episode a bit. I'm not going to say which one it is. I don't want to damage anybody's credibility by saying who exactly, but there was a streamer. Pardon?
Sorry, I don't know who that actually is. I said, you know who you are, episode 7, but I don't actually, caveat, I don't know who that is.
Episode 7 was Teagues, actually. So sure she's gonna love you for that. It was in the episode was in the teens. There was and again, I've no bad blood, but the interview was just a little bit awkward, and that was my first experience of really having to kind of draw things out. So that was probably the most difficult, because the first time I had to learn about something.
Yeah, very true. And like you said, you can only get as much as they'll give you. Like you can ask leading questions all you want, but if apologies, my dogs are losing it right this second. You can only ask so many leading questions, but if they're giving you answers like, yeah, a while, like that, what else can you really do? Which is fair. Do you have a question that you wish you had been asked if you got to write the questions I wrote for you?
honestly no. There's I mean, testament to us what a stand-up job you've done, but no, it's weirdly enough, I never really kind of think about it in terms of, this is what I'd like to be asked, because just from like a guest perspective, from having been a guest on podcasts before, they kind of you give like a brief overview of what you want to talk about and what you're there to kind of promote, and it's sort of just, it writes itself in that sense. So really, any question that surprises me is like a sort of, it's a massive win at that point.
Well, that's interesting. It's good to know. I wasn't too sure. So I know some people, especially if they're going to promote a certain thing, that would be like, I hope they ask me about X, Y, Z, which it all leads into that too. But it's just general thing. That being said, are there plans for more books after the first one has been released to critical success?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Book 2 is currently in progress. Book 2 is, I have a working title for it, but I don't know if I'm going to keep it. The working title is Ready to Record, a how-to guide on starting your own remote podcast. And it's going to be very much so it's going to be less story driven like the journey so far was. And it's going to be very much more anecdotal about sort of, if you want to start your own podcast, if you want to get into podcasting, or if you have started a podcast but not sure where to go, it's very much this is what I did, this is what I learned, if this works for you, give it a go kind of thing, so it's gonna be that. And I also have an idea for book 3, which is going to be very daring. But I have an idea for book 3, and in the spirit of celebration for episode 100, I'll happily tell you what that is. I want to write a book based around the successes of live streaming, which is ironic coming from me considering I failed at it, but that's not the point. What I want to do is I want to incorporate the podcast into this by interviewing sort of different streamers who have hit success in different ways. So you'll have say like the top sort of FPS ranked worldwide streamer kind of thing, like Valorant, Overwatch, CSGO, those types of games.
Yeah.
Things like that, who by their own rights would be very successful streamers, but it would just be but they're a very, very different type of streamer to somebody who has 15K in a just chatting stream and doesn't play games and just talks to people. Compare that to somebody who became an overnight success for doing whatever, and that just continued. The likes of Queso, for example, or so really just interviewing different types of podcasts or different types of streamers based on sort of their level that they're at, and talk about the sort of ideas about being a success in podcasting, and just sort of really what I hope that achieves is it kind of like breaks down the sort of this idea that you have to be hitting XYZ to be a success, that you can just literally, if you get the enjoyment out of it, if it, even if you can get monetized and it gives you an extra bit of pocket money, go for it. You know what I mean? Or just even enjoy it. That's it. But that's the idea so far. That's going to be a long way down the road yet. But I have 2 and 3 pretty much just done, and then as for anything further than that, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, the Andy trilogy. How exciting! It's good to know that you obviously have that idea in your mind too of like what you do and you're so far ahead, because like compared to a lot of people, and I think they're obviously leading out of the 100th episode. It's something that I think maybe would be nice for you to hear, but I think people need to know this overall. Like, the reason that you're obviously at this point and you've done 100 years, like it's been mentioned too in chat as well, is the fact that this is live by the way, everyone, is the fact that you've stuck with it. You've stayed dedicated. I think the idea of commitment is lost on a lot of people, especially in the day and age of having ChatGPT, having, AI generated video and this and that, like slop farms and stuff like that. I think people are too quick to try something, and if it doesn't work, give up on it and try something else, and they'll try 1,000 things, and it's like, oh, nothing ever works. But the one person who sticks to something they like doing and goes through with it regardless of whatever metrics are looking in their face or whatever it is, like if they're enjoying it and they're consistent, like they're going to see success, even if that success is, look, I put out 100 episodes. Because I mean, based on 6% of people who ever get there, that's pretty amazing for podcasts. So I do want to commend you on the fact that you've stayed consistent and you've kept doing it. Here's to 100 more, man. I think it's really, really cool what you've done and what you're building, and I'm excited to see how far it goes as well. I do have sort of one last question I want to ask you, just before I end off my interviewing portion here, and we sort of do whatever needs to happen in the world of podcasting. But do you have how do I say this without sounding too corny? If you could give one piece of advice to yourself before you quit streaming, especially because you said book 3 would lead into it, what would it be with all your experience now? Even if obviously if it's not about, knowing that you're going to become a podcasting person, what would you say to your person to sort of keep your spirits up? Because I know everybody, regardless of what they do, seems to sort of struggle with that stuff and need a pretty strong mental to do something for 100 episodes. So I'm wondering what you'd give now that retrospect is here.
Yeah, like so when it came to streaming, I would literally just say, don't take it too seriously. If I had to go back to myself a year ago and say, I was like, don't take it too seriously. Think back to why you started doing it and let that be what takes you forward, because of course, when you start something, no matter what it is, if you start something, you may or may not have an end goal in mind. You may just want to do it for enjoyment. You may also want to see where it goes. But it will get to a point where you will know whether you want to continue with it or not. And if you kind of get to the point where you're just like, this isn't for me, and you're forcing yourself to do it, then don't let that go on too far, because it will just completely it'll make you resentful. It'll make you resentful of it. That's what happened to me, and I regret that. Like, I would love to feel like I can hit the go live button and stream something and feel comfortable doing so, but I feel like I left it with such a bad taste in my mouth because of the way that my attitude was towards it. And it wasn't like this entitled, oh my God, I don't get any viewers. Oh my God, why am I doing this? So, nothing like that. It was because I wasn't consistent enough, and it just sort of got to the point. Nobody ever knew when I was going to be live. I wasn't really communicative with it. And I just sort of I was like, okay, I think I'm at the point now where I've lost it. And it's going to take me more work to get back to that point than I'm willing to give, especially with what I've got going on now. So, yeah, my advice would be just Don't take it too seriously. Network, enjoy it, but never forget why you started it. That would probably be the best advice I could give.
Beautiful. I'm sure, something like that will inspire someone at some point to go, you know what? Because from my perspective too, and like, I'm not sure the percentages, whatever it may be, but I think I've read something where like people after 1 year stop streaming, 2 years stop streaming, 3 years stop streaming, and it gets down more and more. But for me, and again, no one's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes and sort of loses their way. But from only my own perspective, I've found having a certain attitude towards it has helped me a lot. And like you said, it's the same idea. You don't take it too seriously. Like you're doing it to have fun. You're doing it as stress relief. You're doing it as whatever it may be. But yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, with people having vanity goals and things like that, like it is important to have goals in life and like with everything. But you need to sort of find out, is that goal really, will you feel satisfied if you hit that? Or is it more just something you're using to help drive you towards the goal of creating something and, doing something that will be there forever to some degree? We never know. I don't know what's going to happen on the internet, digital footprint and all that.
Oh, for sure. And another thing as well, don't try and do too much at once, because you will burn out. If you burn out, if you show any signs that are different to how you normally are on camera, your audience will know that before you even do. And that is humbling as well as it's humbling as well as kind of frustrating, because you think that you're kind of hiding it well, but you can't hide things. You can't hide things from your audience. It's but yeah, just make sure you look after yourself while you're doing it as well. That's probably, I wish I could go back and tell myself all this, but I hope that it goes to the next person and does them some justice.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I mean, this has been it. Thank you for being interviewed on my podcast, Behind the Camera. This has been a lot of fun, man. I'm sorry. I do know that, like, obviously I butchered it towards the start because, like I said, I'm not a podcaster. But this is good fun, man. I had fun like trying to think of what questions I could have, because I could just be like, what's your favorite episode? What's your least favorite episode? What guest did you hate? Like, but I don't want people to go, oh, this guy's just ragging on his guests, because you're grateful for every single person who's been on, surely.
100%, yeah, 100%.
So I tried to think like what makes you tick as an interviewer and as a podcaster. So I hope it helped people understand, and thanks for the last 99, man. I can't thank you for this one because I did most of the work.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so thank you, Logan, for episode 100. No, like honestly, no, I do appreciate it, because I know it was a big ask for you to come on and do this, because especially if you've never interviewed anybody before, I can imagine it's probably one of those things where it's like the idea of it sounds great, and then whenever it comes into like actually thinking about questions, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. But no, honestly, man, I appreciated everything about your question. Appreciate you doing this, and yeah, just thank you, man. I really, really do, appreciate you being part of the journey of the first 100 and going into the next 100 and beyond. And that brings us to the end of episode 100 of Behind the Camera. I'd like to give a very special thanks to Logan for taking the time to interview me for this episode. I mentioned it at the end of the conversation that it was such a big ask, but I couldn't be happier with how it turned out, so thank you very much. Logan was very much the main reason I got into streaming, and then of course into the podcast, and he's always been a great friend to me, so this really has felt like a really nice full circle moment. And if you would like to see more of Logan, you can find him on TikTok and YouTube at Logaaaaan64. That is Logan with 5 A's, 64. He also composed all of the music for Behind the Camera and is an incredibly talented musician, so be sure to check out his music on Spotify and all other platforms under the same handle. As always, thank you also to all the patrons for your support. Paid or followed, you are hugely appreciated. And of course, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, check out my link tree in the description for all socials and my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, which is out now. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.